Welcome back to the Cream City Club podcast. You are listening to episode number 46. I'm Spencer Michaelis, and I'm here as always with Gunnar Amalunk. Gunnar, how you doing today?
Good. If you've been here since day one as a fellow listener and fan of the podcast, you know that this is probably pretty much a full circle episode. All the way back in episode one, we talked about Craig Counsell leaving us, and that was how this podcast got started. So now here we are, episode 46, Spencer, and talking about it all over again. But now it's real, and he's back in Milwaukee, and we're facing him. So
Yes,
I'm
it
excited
is.
to talk about it.
Yeah. Nope, I'm in the same spot. Excited to go over some of this and talk about a little bit of the Red Sox series as well, but I think we're mostly going to dive into this Cubs series. So if you are listening and you haven't yet subscribed, please take a moment to do so on whatever platform you are on and to rate us 5 stars. Follow us on Twitter at the Cream City Pod to stay up to date on these episode releases. And as we alluded to, today is going to be a Brewers focused episode. So Gunnar, what do we got coming up?
We'll be talking about the roster and injury news updates that we've gotten throughout the last week or so. Some actually pretty significant ones we got to talk about. And then Spencer talked about we're going to touch on that Red Sox series. Don't know how much, but we'll touch on a little bit of each of those games. And then, of course, we've got the vibes heading into this Cubs series. Um, Mostly going to be that Craig Counsell talk that I was alluding to. He had, of course, as expected, a lot of people talking to him about what he was going to be facing going into this series, having them be back in Milwaukee for the first time. So he gave us a couple quotes that were interesting before that game. And then, of course, the one game that we got so far is the game one of the Cubs series. And then right now we're recording through game two. So we're going to have sporadic game two updates. And I put a little asterisk here for Spencer because as you guys know, listening to this podcast, Spencer just does it anyways, and he'll just start yelling out some updates about that game. But and then of course we got our new segment questions for the crew. So we got a couple questions to go over with that. But to get our roster news and injury news started, one of the bigger ones that we got first here was Jacob Eunice said he's throwing live bullpen on Friday and then would be able to go to a rehab outing next week if that all goes well. And then after a couple of shorter outings, 2 to 3 innings, he thinks that he could be ready to come back for a relief appearance, hopefully with the Brewers. So, Spencer, what does that impact for the Brewers if he is able to come back and assuming it all goes well?
Yeah, I mean, I think if you can replace a guy like Mitch White with someone like Jacob Junis, that would be
Yeah.
very ideal. And that's pretty much what you'd be doing. It'd be the multi-inning guy, the longer relief guy. But Junis is capable of going into a bigger spot and getting outs too, which someone like White clearly has not been able to do. So I think it'd be a big addition back to the pitching staff. I when they signed him, I was hoping he'd be able to start, but I do think after the injuries and after everything and the fact that it's a shoulder, I think it's smarter to just go with the shorter outings, keep him in the pen where he's been very good the last couple of years with the Giants. So, yeah, it'd be good to get him back. And then on another pen arm that we've got potentially coming back here, JB Bukowskis, who got off to a really, really good start this year before his injury. He is expected to throw a pen on Friday. Not much news beyond that for him, but I would imagine that would mean that if that goes well, you're probably looking at a week or so until he starts some rehab assignments as well. Um, he's on the 60 day, and I can't remember exactly when that started. I feel like it was mid-April, so he might still be a couple weeks away from being eligible to be reinstated. But Junis would be eligible pretty much after that first rehab outing. So both of them could potentially be coming back, which would be a really nice addition to what has already been a very successful bullpen lately. So yeah, two arms that would be great to get back, and then another arm potentially on his way back is now maybe not as much. Which we learned DL Hall. I guess we didn't learn. We knew DL Hall was potentially dealing with a re-aggravation of his left knee, but today it was kind of confirmed that he did catch his cleat on a pitch that he was throwing in Nashville. Um, and he said it felt similar to the bunt play when he originally got hurt in St. Louis. So he got an MRI yesterday. He's waiting the results of a second opinion on that. But Gunnar, I guess I'll throw it to you quickly. I know pitching's not really your thing, but we talked about it in text a little bit. So it seems like at this point it probably is going. I shouldn't say. Assuming this does come back with bad news and he's going to have a pretty big setback, I feel like he probably has to come out of the pen when he returns because it's going to be pretty hard to build him up by the time he does come back. But I guess long term, what do you think? Do you think he still can be a starter, or do you think it's just going to end up being the best route for him to just be a reliever and probably be pretty good in that role?
Yeah, I think long term it's still definitely starter, and something that you obviously pointed out to me in text, which you alluded to, was that was the plan still, even with before this injury even happened again, was they're definitely trying to have him come back and start. I told you though, I had red flags, not even so much from what I saw. It was just I didn't like what I saw coming out of the season, how he started. And then you hear that he's been dealing with it for however long. He's basically at least a year, now, if not more. I don't know who he probably he didn't even know.
2021, he said.
Yeah, it's been years, and he's been able to play through it and look good in the pen, which I guess that's if you're talking about the pen situation. I think that he would at least be able to come back and do that, but it's scary. I mean, I don't know much about pitching, but I would know that that's where a lot of your strength comes from, a lot of your stability comes from. That's probably two things that you need as a pitcher. And that's why I think I had my red flags up with him, is because even when he just started that rehab assignment, he was throwing better and the velocity was up a little bit. And you can probably get into what looked better at the time and stuff as far as specifically goes. I can never say that word. I'm so sick of saying that word. I need to stop saying that word.
Specifically.
Uh, specifically. Okay, there you go. Every podcast I try saying that word and I can't get it out. But yeah, I just he had a shorter rehab. That's how rehabs go. So I'm like, okay, it's gonna take a while to get it built up and for me to feel comfortable again with the velocity being up. That was already sort of a question going into the season because he hasn't started in a little bit, outside of in the minors. So I do expect him to see him this season, and it will be in that bullpen role, because I don't see how he's going to be able to build himself back up again later in the year to become a starter. I would love it if that was actually the case because you know that he's probably on track to do a lot of good things then. But I think long term, you would hope he would next season they're going to try it again. But just knowing that he's probably still going to be okay in a relief role, I'll take it. And what maybe answer two questions for me. What did you see from him before he got hurt that gave you some promise that he could still be a starter this year? But if he is in the pen and he does come back in the pen, maybe what does that look like? Because we already got a couple lefties that we like right now a lot in the pen. Would he be more like a long relief type role, or what would you see for him? Would he be high leverage, or it just kind of depends on what we're actually looking at with him?
Yeah, that's what's so hard at the moment. They do have three lefties who have been fantastic this year in Hobie, Brian Hudson, and Jared Koenig. And
True. I guess I forgot about him. Yeah,
I
he's
mean,
been
he's
really good.
been fantastic. His ERA is like 2, I think, right now. He's been
Hmm.
really good. And even if you go on Baseball Savant, like Koenig looks good. He's not striking people out, so that stuff is down, but he's getting a ton of soft contact, and it's usually on the ground, and that's a pretty good
Hmm.
combination of what you want. So it makes it difficult because putting him in the pen, you're not really getting an extra 4 lefties in the pen is a tough thing to do. Like that's a lot of left-handed pitchers in the bullpen. Um, but I do think at this point that that would be how they'd have to do it when he comes back. I just don't see how he'd get built up. But in terms of what he was doing better, I mean, he was in Nashville. We got Statcast data, and he was 94 to 95 on all of his fastballs. He got 95.9 or something, so basically 96 once. And the induced vertical break was back up to where it used to be. And that, to me, is the most important part, more than the velocity. His fastball shape went from being pretty good to being horrible when he got here. And that is more important to me than the velocity because you can get away. I mean, Robert Gasser doesn't have the greatest velocity, but his four seam fastball shape it's more about like the vertical approach angle and it's not as much about the velo, it's about all the other stuff that comes with it. And I think people overlook that a guy like Emder Uribe's fastball is a bad shape, and that's why it still gets hit when he makes mistakes. So you can throw really hard, but if the fastball is a terrible shape, it doesn't matter that much. Um, so seeing that back to where it used to be when it was a good shape was really big for me. So I still like all the secondaries, and it's really just the fact that the fastball went from a plus pitch to a terrible pitch when he got here. And if it can even be above average, I still think he's going to be a good starter long term. But like I said, assuming this is a legitimate setback and that he doesn't get good news on the second opinion, which sounds unlikely given how he's feeling right now, I would assume if he comes back to the majors this year, it will be in a pen role. But speaking of another young player that we haven't seen this year, I guess, Garrett Mitchell is, according to Cotroneo, he's throwing with his own glove for the first time. Um, I don't know what that means. I'm guessing it's related to the finger, like he wasn't able to put his finger in a glove or something because of the issue.
I think so. He was playing catch, but he was playing it with somebody catching for him, I think was what he
Oh,
was
okay.
doing for a while.
Got it. That makes sense. Um, and it kind of looks like a mid-June return is within reach because he did start taking swings this past weekend as well when they were in Boston. So we've gotten some good updates on both sides of the ball for him. And as anyone who knows, anyone who's been listening knows, I'm not the biggest believer in Mitchell, but given what Frelick and Weimer have shown this year, I'll take a shot on Mitchell figuring some things out and continuing to at least have decent results, and maybe we'll get that out of him. So I'll be happy to see him back into the mix and see what we can get out of him for sure. Um, and then back to the pitching side, we got Brandon Woodruff on the field today throwing. Kurt Hogue put out a little video of that. Brandon Woodruff seemed to be throwing from a slightly different arm slot, it looked like. So that's interesting to me. Don't know for sure if that's part of the rehab. Don't know for sure if that is just a. It's possible that his arm slot was something they were concerned about with causing some of the pain he's been dealing with and causing some of the issues with the shoulder. So I wouldn't even say slot. It's more the arm path, I guess. Like the whole path is a little different. It's not the greatest video to see that, but I saw somebody else pointing it out, and you can definitely tell that it is a little different. So that'll be interesting. I think you're going to see a different Brandon Woodruff when he comes back. I don't know that it'll be a terrible thing, but I don't think you're going to see the same overpowering guy. I think you might be seeing a different type of pitcher. And the good news is, Gunnar, we've talked about it a lot, but he's the type of guy who just competes so much that you feel like he's going to find a way to adjust to whatever he's got in the tank when he gets back out there. So, yeah, it was a lot of good news. And then one more, we had Rhys Hoskins going through what Dom Cotroneo described as a vigorous sprint workout, which for Rhys Hoskins, I don't know that sprinting is the word we can use. That man cannot move. But clearly he's going out there and he's moving pretty well, it sounded like, and he's hoping to possibly return by the time they play in Philadelphia, which for a number of reasons would be cool for the Brewers, but also for him to be able to go back to Philly and get back on the field. And I guess my only concern with that is I hope he's not setting that as like a specific date to try and come back and pushing himself to a point where it's not safe or not the right timeline just because he wants to play in Philadelphia. But I would imagine that Brewers personnel wouldn't let that happen. So it'd be cool for him. But Gunnar, on any of those ones I just went through, did you have anything you wanted to talk about?
Uh, Mitchell, obviously, if you know this podcast, you know I'm excited about him, and more so even now because of, like you said, the guys that we've seen so far haven't really blown our socks off. So, just giving us a new look at somebody else would be nice to see. You wonder how in shape he is and everything else. I guess it's a hand injury, so he should have been pretty much in shape. So, um, just gonna have to get him game ready. I think he's got some rehab, and you might have mentioned it too, but I'm pretty sure he's got some like rehab assignments that he has to go through to get him at some at bats too. So, excited to see him back. And then Woodruff, it's hard to even talk about it right now because who knows if he's just messing around or whatever the case may be. It seems still so early in the process for him, but um, yeah, I mean to have him back in the fold next year in any capacity, we know what our starting situation's looking at like right now, and to have another starter who's pretty solid at the very least, hopefully, to get him back next year would be great. And yeah, and to get Reese back, we need to get that power back in the lineup as a righty too. So, the sooner we can get him back, the better, in my opinion. So, yeah, I guess I could slide us into the Red Sox series. Don't know how much we'll be talking about this one, but game one, of course, we had the Brewers win. A nice offensive game as it seems like we were getting. Well, actually, we should probably mention that it seemed like the world was falling down on Brewers Twitter before this series. For some reason, I don't know why. We lost two series in a row, I think.
Yep.
Um, we were 2-4, and it's just like, oh my God, we suck all of a sudden. I keep seeing the Brewers suck all over Twitter, and I'm like, what happened? We lost a couple close games. Now, granted, they were pretty like it was tough losses. I'm not gonna lie about that. And against a bad team, I understand it. But I don't know if you have anything about the Twitter reaction. I'm just trying to put myself
I,
back in the headspace before, because now it seems great, the headspace. We seem like we're rocking right now, but
oh yeah. Yeah.
before the series, I just kept seeing that we're horrible. It's like we're in first place. The Cubs are doing horrible. Like we're fine right now. But yeah, I don't know if you had any thoughts on that before. Put yourself back in the headspace before the series in this Cubs game.
Yeah, this happens every year. I think I had a tweet that specifically said last year, "Oh, we're at the point of mid-May where Brewer fans freak out about a series loss to some bad team." And it was after the A's sweep last year, which a friendly reminder that the Brewers won 92 games last year and won the division and got swept by the 2023 Oakland A's. Like that's how baseball works. I know people hate hearing that, and some people view that as an excuse, and I get it. It's not fun to hear it, and it's not a fun experience when it's happening. But good teams lose to bad teams all the time in baseball. It's just how it is. And I, I really don't get how people watch baseball their whole lives and don't start to accept that. Like, I understand in the moment you get upset and all of that, but you would think after a little bit of reflection, people would be able to be like, all right, we're in first place. We're up 2.5 games on the Cubs. It's the end of May. We're going into a series. It's a road trip. It's a 9-game road trip, which is not those. It's the only one the Brewers have this year. They actually had a bunch of them last year, but it's the only one they have this year. And in the end, they came out 4-5. Obviously, this was before the Red Sox series, and they ended up taking 2 of 3 in that one. Obviously, so that makes it feel better. But they were close to sweeping, and then they could have had a winning road trip, and we were up in arms and going crazy before we even finished the road trip. Like it, I remember somebody once saying that baseball is not meant to be viewed and to be dissected like football. It's not a small increments type of sport. Like you can't take too much from small sample sizes or you're going to go crazy. You're going to lose your mind over the course of a season. And then of course I saw a pretty funny video on Twitter, and I think it was a TikTok originally actually, but it was some guy just talking about how, oh, when my team loses 1 out of 17 NFL games, oh, all right, we'll get them next week. And then when my team loses 1 out of 162 MLB games, it's DFA everybody, DFA, get rid of fire the coach, fire everybody. It's like that seems to be how people view sports sometimes, and I'm very much the opposite. If you've ever seen me watch a Packer game, I will lose my mind during a bad game because to me that's that's a 16th, 17th of your season now, and it's like I don't understand why it's the opposite for people, but yeah, that was an interesting reaction for sure before the series. And then Friday night, Apple TV, which by the way, they've improved quite a bit. Those broadcasts are a lot better than they were last year. Those were awful last year. They were pretty good the 2 times we've had them so far. The big one in this game was obviously the William Contreras absolute missile, 112 mile per hour home run over the monster into that fan's bucket of popcorn. And yeah, there's really not too much to talk about here. I did think that was cool of Tim Dillard to go bring the guy popcorn, and then after the game for the guy and his wife or girlfriend to be able to come on the field and meet William, have him sign the bucket. Like they turned it into a pretty cool experience. I'm sure the guy was a little embarrassed at the moment, but he kept getting his face shown on national TV, basically on Apple TV. But it was cool that they made it an actual moment for the guy that he'll probably remember forever. So you love that stuff with sports. That's the best part about sports, honestly. And then game 2, another 6-3 win. I guess what we probably should mention here is that Jared Koenig started both of these games in an opener role, and I thought that was an extremely good play by Murph. I think the Red Sox load the top of their order with lefties, so they're never going to change that. They're not moving Rafi Devers down in the order just to avoid Jared Koenig. But it worked both times, especially the second time when he went 4 up, 4 down with 3 strikeouts. But I mean, I love when you can be a little creative that way, and it worked really well. And in game 2, Koenig and Ray were combining for a no-hitter through 6 before Ray gave up a double and then another double and then maybe another double. But he started getting hit around a little bit. But it was the exact reason why you use the opener is to try and avoid him facing these guys multiple times or at least 3 times. Like he only had to face the top of the order twice. So I thought that was really good work by Murph, and Brewers were able to close that one out 6-3 as well. And then game 3, I guess we had some fireworks in this one. It wasn't not offensively, that's for sure. Nobody was hitting much in this game, but a 2-1 loss. I think the biggest thing, Gunner, was I don't know if we can call it a brawl. Nobody. there was no Abner Uribe punching people in the middle of this one, but the benches cleared, the bullpens cleared, everybody ran in and did the whole, fake macho thing that baseball players do every time anything happens. Um, but Chris Martin, not the Coldplay singer, the Brewers bunted to start the inning. Blake Perkins bunted to start the inning for a hit, and then Bryce Turang followed it with kind of a semi bunt for a hit, but mostly seemed like a sacrifice attempt. Um, Ended up getting Turang out, so you were given an out, so you're welcome. I don't even remember how the second out happened, but then there was a grounder to first. He has to cover first, so he takes the flip and then he turns. And I don't honestly think that Chris Martin was trying to say anything to Quentin Berry. I think he was just doing the thing that a lot of pitchers do for some reason, which is just to start yelling about stuff and kind of under your breath, but in a yelling manner. Um, and but he did it right next to Berry. So Berry hears him, and you could tell he's on the replay. You could see him say something about bunting, clearly upset that they were bunting. Um, Berry reacted. I couldn't believe Quentin Berry got that upset. I've never seen Berry do anything but smile when he's out there. He seems like a very happy-go-lucky guy who enjoys his job. But him and Martin kind of had to be separated. Yelich had to stand between them. A bunch of Red Sox came in, and then, like I said, nothing really happened, and nobody even got ejected in the end, not even Berry, which I was surprised about. But Gunnar, what are your thoughts on, I guess, pitchers and their reactions to bunting? And then I mean, you could talk about the little dust up if you want. I don't think there was actually much there to talk about, but just what caused it, I guess, is more interesting to me.
Yeah, I told you I don't think baseball fights will ever add up 1 + 1 = 2. You just have to understand that it's never going to make sense. Um, with the whole bunting thing, yeah, I get it as a pitcher, and if you're thinking about it like from a competitive standpoint, if you're like trying to act like it's like a boxing match, like, oh, this guy just forfeited and gave me an out. But also that's part of the game is to give like if we gave you an out, you should be happy about that. So that's where the logical part comes in. The unlogical part would be obviously that part of it where um, you're trying to be competitive or you're just like, all right, give me your best versus my best and let's see what happens. But yeah, I don't understand that whatsoever, um, really at all. And it's really getting annoying at this point. I've seen a lot of stuff on Twitter too, I guess, just with the dust ups, and we've talked about how the Brewers have this chippiness to us. Um, Ironically, it was a Cubs account who did this and started the conversation. He had like 1,000+ likes about talking about how, oh, ironically, the Brewers are in another fight once again, and it's like we're like the problem team all of a sudden. But um, yeah, I mean, maybe we talked about this too, but maybe we do take offense to like little things now because we don't want to be pushed around or whatever the case may be. We're not going to be scared of anybody in any sense, but I don't know. It doesn't really bother me either way. I like the chippiness, like I've said before. It didn't get too out of hand this time either. It's hard for me to understand sometimes these baseball fights as I laid it out because it's just hard to get, I guess.
Yeah, I know.
Um, and you can speak from a pitcher standpoint, but I also hate bunting too. So it's like my brain is just mashed potatoes right now, trying to figure out because it's like I'm mad that we bunted. I I agree with you, but also you should be happy because we bunted. So I don't know. If
Yeah.
you have any different thoughts on that.
I guess after the game, he did kind of mention, I think it was more for him. He feels like they're trying to take advantage of him being old, it sounded like, because he's 37 and he's not moving as well. And it's like, okay, well, then they should do that if they think that's an
Yeah.
advantage. Like, that's what they should do.
Sorry.
Yeah, sorry for it's great that you're still pitching well, but you being old doesn't give you free reign for us to just do whatever you want us to do. That doesn't make any sense. But either way, pitchers to me, and I am a pitcher and I am a pitching coach, but there are things that pitchers get upset about that I just do not understand whatsoever. Um, Including people I've coached over the years, but I've had people upset that they bunted against us. Like, just field the ball and throw them out. Take the out that they're giving you. I don't understand. Um, I've had people who are upset about people pimping a homer. And it's like, get them out. Just get them out. Don't give up a home run, and then you don't have to worry about what they do. And I don't know. That's how I always viewed all these things. I figured if somebody did something that did upset me, my best course of action was to get them out the next time they came up because that is what is going to help me win a game. But I don't know. Some people tick differently and it helps them to have that kind of like chip on their shoulder all the time. So I think that helps certain players, and Martin's probably one of them. guy who really reinvented himself and kind of reinvigorated his career in his 30s. Like he really wasn't doing anything until the last 7 years. He's been fantastic. So maybe that's just how he operates and it helps him. But we can move on from that series and jump into the one that I think everyone is a lot more excited to hear and talk about, and that is the Cubs series. And there was somebody returning to Milwaukee for the first time since a kind of a messy exit. And I mean, I I can't believe he didn't get booed when they announced him, but Tyson Miller got DFA'd last year by the Brewers and is on the Cubs now, and nobody seemed to react to him being there. I don't get it.
Weird.
But they booed the Cubs manager, who I'm not really sure who that is. But he came back, I guess. He must have been here for a while. No, Craig Counsell return, like Gunnar hinted at earlier. This was what started this podcast to begin with. We had been talking about it forever, and we decided the day that he went to the Cubs that we were going to need to talk about it, and we might as well record it. So that's what happened, and Counsell had his first media availability in Milwaukee since that happened. And I guess the biggest quote we got was probably him pointing to David Stearns deciding to step away and then eventually leave as a reason that he started thinking about his potential exit from the Brewers organization and from Milwaukee. And I'll let you just jump right into it with your thoughts on that, Gunnar, because there was a lot that went through my head when I heard that.
Yeah, I don't, if that's truly just what it was, I know it's funny because he didn't want to answer the question and then he ends up answering the question because he's like, well, it's not one thing that made me leave. And it's not even just this wasn't one thing that we knew that Stearns was going out the door for quite a while. Even when Craig was here, at least the idea of him leaving was there for quite a while. So,
Yeah.
I just think if that, let's take him at that word, and that's what got the ball rolling first. I guess, I mean, he didn't get hired by Stearns. That was the first year, I believe we got Stearns right after
Yep.
that, I think the next season. So then it was the
Yeah.
question of, will he keep Counsell? And then he ends up keeping Counsell, obviously. And then now they worked together for quite a while. I just don't understand how that one little thing would make you want to leave everything behind. We've talked about for a couple times here, but Matt Arnold's been David Stearns' right-hand guy, so it wasn't like David Stearns was just the head honcho, and he was for 2018, our best season or deepest run, he was. So I get it. It just seems like a weird thing to, I mean, it's just a weird thing to point to, I guess, if it's specifically this one quote that we're talking about. And yeah, I don't know. Do you have any thoughts on that exact one quote if we're taking it at that face value of, do you think it's even valid that he, because it's, I guess for me, we can make it a bigger topic now, but for me, it's just like on paper, and if it's in any other scenario, any other job, any other team circumstance, I would understand that. And I think having this relationship, like if you were a GM and I worked with you for 8 years and you're my best friend, and then all of a sudden you leave, it's like, well, that was why I was here, is because I got to work with my best friend and
Right.
had a good relationship, whatever. But Greg, you're from Wisconsin. You've talked about how much this meant to you having the Brewers job. We can go through it all. I go back to episode 1. We talked about it all. It just seems like a lot to leave behind, because the ball got rolling because the GM decided that he might be going to go somewhere else with a bigger payroll. It just doesn't make a lot of sense to me. But yeah, I guess what were your thoughts on that?
Yeah. I mean, to me, it just felt like I agree with everything you said, but I think the one thing I semi get is that he was saying it, I think that it felt like things were changing and that he saw somebody who had been fully entrenched in this franchise decide that it was time to do something new, and it just made him think about that too. And I think what we talked about it at the beginning in episode 1, and we've talked about it since, but the reaction to Craig Counsell coming back, if he had gone to the Mets, or if he had gone to Cleveland, or if he had gone to Houston, or if he had gone to the Yankees or whoever, I think he would have been welcomed back pretty warmly. I'm sure people would have booed. There would have been some booing. People didn't like him when he was a manager here, which they were wrong, but people didn't like him when he was a manager here. So people weren't going to like him. Not everyone was going to be happy to see him back either way, but he picked one of two teams that would induce this type of reaction that we'll talk about in a minute here. But really, it was this or the Cardinals. Did Freddie give up a bomb? Yes, he did. 1-0 Cubs. But really, I mean, it was the Cubs or the Cardinals. If he went to one of those two teams, he was going to get the reaction he got, and he did it. And you could say, like I said, I think the thought that, oh, Stearns left, I don't know if this is really like if I'm really feeling enthused at this job anymore, if I think I just need something new. Like I get that in some ways, and it would have been fine if he went anywhere else, literally anywhere else except there in St. Louis. And that's the thing he still seems to not grasp completely is that Brewers fans aren't upset he left. They're upset he left for the Cubs. That's the biggest thing that people are upset about after being born a Brewer, born I'm one of you, I'm one like all of that stuff. No Brewer fan would have gone and just been a Cubs fan just because. Like that's not how it works. Obviously, he got paid the most money all time for a manager and all of that. Like that's great. Good for him. He set the market. I don't think he really changed the market at all, but he set the market that he wanted to set, and that's where he's at. But I don't know. I think that's what just will always seem to escape him is that it's not about leaving. It's about leaving and going where you went. So that can lead us into the reaction that he got in game one. And I have to say, the reception that Craig got was even beyond what I was expecting. I'm not going to lie. I knew Brewer fans were going to go nuts. People have been waiting for this for months since we started recording this podcast. This has been circled on the calendar since the schedule was available, and we knew Craig was going to Chicago. And I guess I was kind of worried that there were going to be too many Cubs fans there for it to really be that loud of a reception. What I didn't really take too far into account is that boos carry a lot better than claps do. And so a bunch of people screaming boo are going to drown out clapping from anybody. And there's really no positive thing to yell other than woo, which sounds like boo. So you can't really yell above the booing. And wow, it was loud. I mean, I think first of all, the Brewers absolutely played that tribute video as a means in order to one, it makes them look like they're taking the high road by putting something up like that. But two, they absolutely knew it was going to draw an insane reaction from the crowd. So they win no matter what in that spot. I can guarantee you that was the plan. I'm pretty confident that they were doing that on purpose and that they were not actually excited to show a tribute video to Craig. And I will say after the game, it was kind of funny when they asked Counsell about it. He was like, yeah, I didn't really see much of it. It was pretty short. Because yeah, they weren't trying to actually tribute you. They just wanted to have a reason to show a little bit more Craig Counsell time other than just announcing you on the lineup and get everybody fired up. So good job by the Brewers in that regard because I'm pretty confident they did that on purpose. And yeah, I mean the atmosphere there was just insane. It was as close to a playoff game as we had seen, honestly, that I had seen, other than, maybe like that Tigers series in 2018, like end of season, regular season, you get some really good crowds that are really into it. But that was as good of a crowd as I'd seen in a long time for a regular season game. And it was a lot of fun. And we can get into what happened with the game, but I think quickly we can talk about Craig's reaction to his reception. And he talked about it prior to game two today. And he was talking about it. He said he went home and his whole family was actually there, meaning his two kids from college and everything, because they're done with their seasons and their school year and everything. And they had dinner, and he just said about the reaction, about the booing. He said, we had a lot of laughs about it, to be honest with you. More than anything, we laughed about it. So, Gunnar, what's your reaction to that quote? And do you think my guess is they did kind of laugh about it, but do you think he probably felt a little bit of it probably hurt him a little bit more than he was leading on, I would guess.
It just has to hurt him so much more than what he is saying, like you said. I mean, or he's just, I really cannot understand his level of thinking of just understanding what you've just left behind and how much meaning it has behind it. Or maybe he is just that clueless because he got all the money. I don't know. Um, but yeah, I mean, playoff atmosphere wise, you were there. I wasn't. We're going tomorrow. That's why I wanted to feel that because these Cubs series already had that type of atmosphere going back to 2017, really, once
Oh yeah.
both these teams were good at the same time, which is funny. Even when we were kids, I didn't really consider the Cubs like a huge rival. Like I knew that we're close in proximity, and they call it the I-94 rivalry or whatever, but it just never felt like it does now, where now it literally feels like hate on both sides. which is good. I like that for baseball. But yeah, I mean, I'm dying for, I guess, quick story time. I went to Game 6 of 2018 NLCS, and I had standing room tickets right. I guess it was the side of the first base, um, on our side, so first base side. And I will never forget Jesus Aguilar hit like a double down the right field line first inning it had to be. And I did not hear a single thing. It was that loud where I could just hear Bobby Uecker's voice in the background and I just see a ball floating into right field. And I'm like, this is the best feeling I've ever had in my entire life. And then we know what happened after that the next game. But there's nothing better than Brewers playoff baseball or Brewers atmosphere like that. And yeah, I mean, it's good to hear that the Cubs fans obviously were able to push them out a little bit. I don't always enjoy when we make it a purpose to have them not be able to get tickets or whatever, but I get it. But yeah, I mean, as far as Craig's quote, I don't know. I think I I will be booing him tomorrow. I will be saying
Oh
that.
yeah,
And
I
I'm
will.
glad he got the reception that he got. He deserves every bit of the reception that he gets. And it's almost a little bit funny too, I guess I should say this about his situation is um, the Cubs have all the resources still. Obviously, they have a great system. It's just funny to see like the Cubs fans complain about their roster so much and with their lineup situation. And we'll talk about the game specifically. There's one guy who it seems like Cubs fans are pretty much entirely over, but it's just such a Craig Counsell move to have him out there. And it's just funny to see him have this roster that he's been handed, and now he has to deal with this. And like I said, going forward, they're going to have a great team, and it could be this season they could have a great team. But it's just funny to see that what he's left with, and he's got to watch us have all this success, and hopefully this season, I guess so far we have. But yeah, it's just funny to see what he's been left with and what he has to watch now. And I guess I had this question later after this segment because I just thought of it, and we've probably talked about it episode 1, but you don't even have to answer it if you don't want to. But I was thinking about like what would even have him. Is there even a situation where he gets redeemed? Like I don't know if there's any coming back from it because you can't. The only thing that would make sense for him doing this is winning a World Series. Then he could be like, okay, I got what I wanted. And you literally can't argue with that. I got my championship, and then maybe we can come back afterwards and I can explain myself and we could have this nice moment. But if he doesn't get that championship and it was just all for money and you left all that behind, all of the loyalty and the fans and how much it meant to you probably to grow up being a Brewers fan and all of this just to leave for some money and then you lose all the respect, but you got the same trophy case is kind of how I see it as. So um yeah, I guess is there any situation where you see we could shake hands in 10 years, 20 years and it'll be fine or um as I talked about earlier when I first started talking is these Cubs series now when we were kids it didn't feel this hated but now it feels like that is the one place you should not be going is the Cubs. We don't mess with the Chicago Cubs fans but yeah, is there any sort of redemption before we start talking about game 1 here?
I don't think so. I don't think it happens at this point. I maybe when he's 80 plus years old, 30 some years down the line, he'll be able to bring that back around, but I don't see it happening. I I will say this. I'm always going to maintain that he was a good manager here. I'm never going to change that opinion. He did a lot of good things for the Brewers, and the Brewers did a lot of good things while he was the manager. It still comes back to you don't go where you went. You don't leave. And it would, again, like you just mentioned, it would be different if this was just a guy who was managing the Brewers for 8 years and then left and went to the Cubs. Just some guy who had been a manager, didn't have any connections to the team, to the state, anything like that. That would be different. It would still be, people would still hate him, but that isn't a guy who couldn't come back. That is a guy who it would take some time to heal and then you would get over it. The guy who, I mean, that Born a Brewer commercial has been used for since that was the first or second year he was the manager. They recorded that, and people would play that every playoff run and be like, "This is why it's special. This is why, like, we have our guy here. We got all this." And he left all of that for some money and for a chance to have more payroll, basically, is what it came down to. And the funny thing is, you just talked about it a little bit, kind of, or you hinted at it. The Cubs kind of seem like their off-season plan was to go big on the manager and then not spend a ton of money on the roster. So like Imanaga has been unbelievably good, and we'll see him tomorrow night, unfortunately.
Brewers were
But
in on him actually too. That's kind of We never talked about that. I
Yeah, we
saw
did
an
not talk
article
about
about
that. We
how we
apparently
were
finished
actually in the
second.
running.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, that would have been nice. I would enjoy having that in our rotation right now. Um, but yeah, I mean, it felt like the Cubs kind of banked on saying like, "Hey, this is." It almost to me, and this might be projecting a little bit for him, but it kind of seemed like Theo Epstein trying to make the point that, "Hey, my roster wasn't the problem; it was David Ross. So I'm
Hmm.
bringing in a manager who can actually use these guys that I had and show that they can compete." And they lost Stroman, obviously, but they brought back Bellinger. They added Bush and Imanaga, who have both been pretty good. But it did feel like instead of going out and spending all their money on players, they ended up cheaping out a little bit in that regard and just bringing in the big time manager to try and gloss over some of those issues. And I do think Council's a good manager. I find it funny that Cubs fans hate him because he does all the things still that he did for the Brewers. He just has no bullpen talent. So he's managing it the same way, but they only have like two good relievers at the moment, and it's kind of hard to manage a pen like that. But I don't hate that they that they hate him out there and that everybody's ripping on him right now. I mean, that's not the worst thing for me. So we can finally talk about this game one and everything that happened after Craig's reception and everything that happened there. But I think the biggest story here is Robert Gasser, who, I mean, we're talking about a 1.9 ERA through his first four starts in the majors, which is including a game in Miami where he gave up 4 runs in an inning. That's pretty impressive. 4 earned runs, I should say. He had an unearned run in that game as well because Andrew Monasterio made a terrible play. But Gasser, the biggest thing has been that he hasn't been striking anyone out in these outings, and he's been doing a bunch of, I mean, he's doing a great job limiting hard contact. But when you have only, what did he have? He had 6 strikeouts coming into, yeah, 6 strikeouts coming into this game in 16 innings, I think, or 17 innings. That's just not going to play. You can't have that. Um, and the thing is, you can, okay, Belly just missed it. You can look at what Gasser's done and say he was pitching great and he was doing well, but I don't think what he was doing was sustainable at all before this game. In this game, he came out, he started throwing more four seamers, he started throwing more cutters, and he used his sweeper to lefties and righties more often. To me, that is exactly what Robert Gasser needs to do. He ends up with a 6 innings, 3 hits, no runs, no walks, and 7 strikeouts. So he actually surpassed his entire total prior to this start in just this start for strikeouts. That is the type of pitcher I think he's capable of being when he's at his best. I actually expected it to be a lot different when he came up. I expected some walks, I expected strikeouts, and I thought he might give up some home runs. He's pitching completely differently than he pitched in AAA prior to this start, and then he kind of went back to what he did in AAA in this start, and it worked really well. So I'm hoping the Brewers learned a little bit there because dude can strike people out. He's got the type of stuff to do that. His velo was up a little bit. I think he may have had a little bit of extra adrenaline going because of the setting he was in. He had talked before the game that he hadn't really pitched in a rivalry game since college because you don't really have that in the minors. Like there's no such thing. And we know, obviously, it's a lower stakes thing, but rivalry games in high school and college are still games that you're able to get a little bit more amped up for. And, um, but I imagine when you do it, when you walk out after the reception that the manager on the other team was getting and the whole crowd going nuts, like it had to have felt almost like a playoff start for him. And he just settled right in and was fantastic. I mean, he was so good. And unfortunately for him, Justin Steele was doing the same thing on the other side. So wins and losses don't matter, but it's tough to leave a 0-0 ball game when you've pitched as well as Gasser did. Um, but anyway, I think we also have to shout out the man who came in and kind of cleaned up the Gasser. I don't want to say it was a mess. He gave up 2 leadoff singles in the seventh. He came out for the seventh. They were going to let him get through 7 if he could have. His pitch count still ended up at 81, I think, for the game, which is just tremendous. Like when you're striking people out and keeping the pitch count down, you are pitching extremely well usually. So yeah, he gives off a leadoff single and then Bellinger hits a single as well. And Brian Hudson, relief ace, comes in. I mean, that dude is just shoving. He comes in, he strikes out, gets a strikeout, pop up from Wisdom, and then another strikeout on just the most perfectly placed sweeper to Dansby Swanson that you could possibly throw. A backdoor sweeper that just clips the low and outside corner. for strike three, and Dansby was livid. It was a strike, but I get it because that pitch probably started almost outside the lefty batter's box with how far out Brian Hudson starts and throws from with his delivery and everything. I mean, it could not have been a more perfect pitch. So yeah, those two combining for what ended up being 8 shutout innings. And then in the bottom of the eighth, the Brewers offense finally started to get something going against the Cubs bullpen. What do you know? Um, I saw some people just on the note of Counsell, I guess, some people complaining about him going to his pen there. Like Justin Steele is coming off injury and was at 93 pitches. I don't know what you're expecting him to do there. Like he's going to use his pen. He had his 2 best relievers available and he went to them. But Mark Leiter didn't really have his command going. Gave up a hit to Sal Frelick, which is not easy to do at the moment. He walked Bryce Terang, and I actually didn't notice this. I had somebody pointed it out on, I don't remember where I saw it, but Bryce kind of pimped the walk and looked like upset that he didn't get pitched to, and it was a little bit out of character for him, but I liked it. Like he looked like super locked in when he did it. I don't even know how to explain it exactly, but it was fun to see. That dude definitely is playing with a lot more confidence than he was last year. He looks a lot more, just a lot more locked in and a lot more sure of himself on stuff that he's doing. No second guessing what he's doing. Um, but yeah, that brings up first and second for William Contreras, and we can talk about the guy you're talking about earlier with Counsell's. I mean, this is the type of thing Counsell will be known to do at times, and he's playing Nick Madrigal at third base. William Contreras hits a rocket at him. Like he did smoke it. It was 105 miles per hour, but it was a one hopper. And you would think a one hopper is normally getting fielded. Madrigal completely whiffs on it. It smokes him in like the upper shin near the knee and goes out into left center. Frelick scores from second. Terang goes first to third. And this is, I mean, you're talking about almost a sure double play. With how hard William hit that ball, that was going to be a double play if he fields it because he's going to second and it's an easy turn. Contreras is not slow for a catcher, but he's not fast. So they were going to be able to turn that with relative ease. And instead, it's 1-0. And then, well, actually, Gunnar, why don't we? I'm going to toss it to you because I've talked a lot here. And also, you wanted to talk about Madrigal a little bit and how it kind of is something that you see. It was one of the few things that I would say Counsell had. One of the few issues I had with Counsell as a manager, one were the platoon splits and never really seemingly believing in reverse platoons. And then also his, I don't even know how to call it, but he always wanted to play. It almost feels like he wants to play guys who remind him of himself, if that makes sense. Like I'm not
That's what
even
I was gonna
kidding.
say, yeah.
I kind of feel like that's what it is in some ways. So, yeah, I don't know if you want to expand on that at all, but
Yeah, there's always one guy who Counsell loves to play, and in this situation, it was a guy who they actually probably had out there for defense because you can't actually think he would be able to hit any more than Nick Madrigal. But yeah, I just it was such a storybook way to start his return back to Milwaukee when you got a situation like that, and I texted you right after the game, which we'll talk about how this game ended, of course, but. I said, please go run to Cubs Twitter right now because it is just so familiar looking at all of the stuff. You mentioned the bullpen move and a guy who maybe shouldn't be out there, and it was just totally perfect for the situation. Um, and there probably is something to he should be out there if he is out there for defense. I'm sure he's a good defender, but yeah, it was just perfect how he probably technically shouldn't be out there, but on paper and stats wise he could be, and then the fans go crazy because like this on paper bad player is out there playing and he ruins the game for you. But then yeah, that leads us right next to the next at bat with Willie Adames, who we should probably mention where before the Red Sox series, fans were I shouldn't say fans because it's not all fans. I shouldn't say that. I'm sure a lot of people actually do love Willie Adames because he's a great personality in general. But he was having a rough stretch, and as you talked about, baseball is just totally not a game to attack small samples. And with William, I think Willie, I want to talk about him a little bit before this big. Well, he hit a big home run. Don't want to talk about it first, but I think with him, what I've come to realize is he is a streaky hitter. And when you go back to 2021, we caught him on the best streak possible when you trade for a guy just before midseason, I guess. We had him for a majority of the year, but He had less streakiness that year, but he caught some good streaks, and then you thought that was what he was going to be the next three, however many years we'd have him. And I think a lot of people are just expecting that is that 2021 of like, where is this 900 almost OPS guy that it seems like it comes and goes, but where is this guy? It's like he's still there. It's just you have to let him ride out his streaks. And he had a really bad week, unfortunately, and he had a couple of bad spots where he had big moments and he didn't come up with them. But had a decent Red Sox series. I think I had his stats pulled up just for the last 7 games ish. Yeah, he's got 1100 OPS, which that might no, I don't think that included today still, but um, just on a great run. And then obviously what he did in this one was he got it to a 3-0 count. The broadcast team even said, like, I think it might have been The Rock. I did The Rock again on purpose there to see if he'd catch it, but
I did.
uh, I think Rocky pointed out and said, I would actually let him hit. And I was like, wow, I'm shocked Rock had that opinion to actually let a guy hit 3-0 here. And being Willie Adames, he is a free swinger. As I said, he's streaky. He's all those things. So it's like, I know he wants this moment very badly. So do not swing at a pitch that you don't love. And he swung at a pitch that he loved and he hit it and did not miss it whatsoever. He knew he got it right away off the bat. And um, I guess I want to kick it to you because you were there as and felt that home run when you're in the stands. Um, what did that moment feel like in general when that ball left off the bat? It seemed like it was a no-doubter, but did it actually look like a
Oh
no-doubter?
yeah.
And did the crowd, was it awesome there? I guess is maybe the dumbest way to put it, but the best way to put it.
Yeah, it was a pretty immediate reaction. I think everyone could tell because you knew the nice thing was with a guy on third in those spots, you can at least tell that you're for sure scoring a run because it's going to be a sac fly. So everyone can react right away like, hey, huge, big one run here coming across to give him a 2-0 lead at the minimum. But from my view, you could absolutely tell it was gone right off the bat that he got it. And I didn't even know until later that it was borderline if it was even a strike, but it
Hmm.
was like right at the knees. It probably would have been called one on 3-0, and it did clip the zone. But um, yeah, it was just, I mean, that was a huge moment. It was very cool. Just the crowd, like I said, everything just felt playoff like. It was a lot different than what you're used to seeing in a big moment, even in a big moment in a regular season game. So that was fantastic.
What's your 3-0 stance? Is it player specific or are you just totally
It's
fine
player
with
specific.
guys? Okay,
It's
that's
player
what I
specific
yeah,
for sure.
that's me too.
I'm not letting every single like I am not no. Owen Miller, you can sit there and watch a pitch go by, buddy. You can watch two go by. I
Yeah,
don't
that's how I
care.
am too.
But like, yeah, Willie Adames is a guy I would green light every time. Yelich, I would green light every time. Reese Hoskins, I'd green light every time. William Contreras for sure. Anybody who can hit a home run with like relative ease is somebody I would green light. I like a
Mhm.
Terang, I wouldn't because even at his best, you're probably getting a double. Like, so that doesn't really, that's not much better than a walk in that spot. So that's kind of how I view it. If you can go deep and like Gary Sanchez, I would green light for sure. Um, but guys like that are the ones I would give it to. I wouldn't really give it to the guys who are good contact hitters because I just don't think there's much to gain from doing that. It might be different, I guess, if it's like second and third, where they have a chance to drive in 2 runs by getting a hit instead of walking and just loading the bases or something. But yeah, in general, definitely player and situation specific. But I was very happy to see him swing, and it obviously worked out really well. Saw after the game that was his first 3-0 homer. It was only the third time he'd put a 3-0 pitch in play in his career, and it was only the 10th time he had swung at a 3-0 pitch in his career. And I remember last year, twice, him swinging at ball 4 on 3-0 and not doing anything with it. I think he swung and missed both times,
Yeah.
actually, but like, so he doesn't do it often, and I think he just makes up his mind that he's going to do it when he does it. I don't think there's any reading the pitch once he decides he's going to go on 3-0, but it worked out very well um, in this scenario. So, yeah, no complaints at all. And then we got to see Jackson Chourio have a nice piece of, I mean, a really good swing, hit a double to right center, score another run after Joey Ortiz had walked and gave him a 5-0 lead. And everyone at that point, I think all the Cubs fans were filing out. And that's always an enjoyable experience as well when that gets to happen. But Hobie Milner did make it somewhat interesting. I guess not really completely his fault. The umpire, who upon review was very good yesterday, like really good, But he missed 2 calls in the ninth for Hobie, including a 3-2 pitch that he called the ball to start the inning. So Hobie should have had 1 out, nobody on, but instead he had a guy on first to start the inning. Cody Bellinger with another single. So it's first and third right away, but strike out Morel, fly ball for a sac fly to center, and then what was the third out? Grounder? I don't even remember what the third
Yeah,
out
I don't
was.
remember.
I don't know. Either way, got the third out, won the game, and everyone got to go home pretty happy with the events of the entire day because everyone got to boo Craig Counsell a lot. Everyone got to watch Willy Adames crush a homer on 3-0 to pretty much put the game out of reach. We got to see a nice Chourio double. And Robert Gasser, we got to see shove, and that was also very, very fun. So really good game, very enjoyable. When we go tomorrow, I hope we have just as much fun. And yeah, no, that was a great way to start the series. Thus far, just to give a little update as to where we are in the podcast while watching this game, the Brewers are hitless and base runnerless against Ben Brown through 4 innings. He is absolutely shoving at the moment, and the Brewers seem helpless against his fastball. The good news is, at this moment as well, the Cubs seem somewhat helpless against Freddie's fastball, but Michael Busch did sit on a curveball in his first at-bat for that 1 run that they have on the board at the moment. So that's our recap for Game 2. If something happens before this ends, we'll update. But yeah, we'll move into questions for the crew. So I'm going to start with Chourio, actually, because we just talked about his double a little bit. I guess I'll throw it to you, but I'm going to give you some numbers and some stuff to think about before I let you answer. So do you think Chourio's starting to figure some things out at the major league level? And I'll say this, his OPS right now has been going down lately. Like counting stats wise, you're not really seeing anything that's majorly improved, but his expected weighted on base average in March and April was 266. In May, it's 292. So it's hovering close to 300, which isn't great, but it's starting to look more like a decent spot to be in as a hitter. But in terms of his defense, his outfield jumps have been absolutely incredible lately. I would say his routes have been a little bit of a work in progress, and Dom Cutronia did a really good YouTube video that I'll try to make sure to link actually in the description for this because I always forget to do that when I say that I'm going to do it. But his catch against Suzuki on Monday, which people probably remember, is just a running catch down the right field line. It was actually a 35% catch probability, which makes it a 4-star catch by StatCast measures. And I don't think the Brewers have more than a few of those this entire season. They're not super common. Like 4 and 5-star catches are not common. Chourio made it look very easy. He caught it, not a slide, not a dive, nothing. He just caught it right above his head, running towards the line. His route efficiency on that was nearly 100%, and his jump was perfect. He got a perfect jump on that, so he made a relatively a difficult play look really easy. And I think people sometimes, this is the value of StatCast for outfield defense, because to a lot of people, the play Sal Frelick made in center, which was a great play, everyone knows what I'm talking about, his diving catch going into the warning track, that had an 85% catch probability because he got a horrible jump on the ball, just a terrible read off of the bat. He took a great route. He's a great athlete, so he made a fantastic catch when he got there. But I would bet you that a guy like Blake Perkins would have just caught that running on the run. Like somebody like that would have just made that look a lot easier, and everyone would have been like, oh, okay, nice play. But in reality, it's the same play. It's just some people make it look easier because they're actually playing better defense. And his routes aren't great, like I said right now, but they've been a lot better lately. He had a ball that he caught with a 25% catch probability. And we talked about it on the last episode on the Marlins play. They redid, like they made sure they ran all the numbers again. That play had a 0% catch probability, and I'm still convinced he could have caught it if he would have laid out. And that's how Dom actually shows that he basically got a perfect jump and a perfect route to that ball as well. I think he just doubted that he could actually get to it as he was getting to the point that he was there. If he would have actually dove and caught that, I think it would have qualified as the best catch in StatCast history, and I'm not even kidding. That's how good of a jump and route he took to that ball that he actually had a shot. So I think he's legitimately making strides and looking better, and I hope he continues to get playing time because I still think that's the only way he's really going to figure things out is if you are playing every day and learning on the field. But Gunnar, what are you seeing? I mean, I broke it down more numbers wise. I think personally, I think he's looked more comfortable at the plate for most at bats recently as well. But you have a better eye for those things. So what are you seeing from him more like visually, I guess?
Yeah, defensively, I think is the easiest, and we talked about defensively as a team, but that was the easiest way to probably improve his stock was just be more solid because he's got every tool that he needs. And he just needs more reads to get more comfortable in right field. We've seen him move around a little bit more, but now with Yelich getting more healthy, it's probably going to be back in right field most likely for him, but more stuck there, I guess is the best way to put it. But yeah, I think maybe that more comfortability for him is why he's improving defensively. You add that with this, like his sprint speed and just his fielding overall. I mean, there's no reason why he shouldn't be an amazing defensive player. And his arm talent is also still pretty solid at least. So, but yeah, as far as the bat goes, I think yeah, stats wise, it hasn't looked great, but he's showing flashes of power this year, which is it's weird that that's the way that it's going for him. And it seems like some of our younger guys, it's always gone that way, but at least to start their careers. But for him, it's been the extra base power when we have seen it. It's still been there. And you talked about the level of calmness that he has, I think is what I've noticed too. And probably my biggest concern with him is it seems like he's so jumpy at the plate when he is not going well. And maybe that's an easy thing to point out when a guy's not hitting great and you're like, okay, it looks like he's running in the box basically, like he can't just stay still. But um, I think that there is this level of calmness with him. He does have a lot of movement up top, which I don't necessarily love, but when it seems like almost always when he's hitting well or something good happens with the bat, it's just so much more relaxed and there's not a lot of movement there. But you mentioned the stats too. I think a newer stat, I think it's a new stat, bat speed. I still, I mean, that's got to be something that you can like quantify, but it seems like a little bit of an iffy stat, I guess, because I've heard guys with like using, I think Bryce Turang, I guess maybe is a good example where he's purposely uses a heavier bat, so it's almost like you're trying to kill your bat speed a little bit, and because he maybe felt like he was too early on a ball or something. But I think as far as just for him having the bat speed and we've seen the power, I think it's almost like you're begging for that calmness to happen because you have everything that you need. We just need you to barrel up balls more, find the sweet spot more. And I don't know what his ground ball rate is. I was trying to find that stuff too, but it just seems like he's just like an inch away from being good, and he just need to have him get more contact. And yeah, I think he's on a better path for sure. And we want him to play more, obviously. And he's gotten a couple off days here, even in the last week or so. But being more in these situations, this series for him, Cub series is going to be huge. We keep talking about how these bigger series, it seems meaningless, and they are technically meaningless as far as it is being in May. But I just think it's going to play off huge for him. And you kind of forget that he is literally only 20 years old, for all good his tools are and everything like that. So. Still, I just give him time, and I think that it will eventually pay off at the end of the season. But I do think he's on a lot better path from what I've seen.
Yeah. No, Willie didn't break up the no hitter. So for me, I guess the biggest thing I'm looking at his ground ball rate and all his batted ball stuff. It's actually pretty similar to what it's been in the minors in terms of like what
Hmm.
his best was at low A when he had 37% ground ball rate and a line drive rate of 23%. So that was, I mean, really, really good. Since then, it's basically been like 49 to 50% on the ground, and then a line drive rate in like the 15% range. He can do damage from that type of
Oh
profile.
yeah.
He pulled the ball a lot more in the minors, and I talked about that earlier too. I think there's a confidence level to pulling the baseball where you feel like you can actually trust what you're seeing in turning around pitches. And I think right now there's a second guessing of a little bit. Uh, People always say shoot the middle, but I actually think most good hitters don't hit the ball middle that often. Um, I've looked at it. Yelich's worst years have been when he's hitting the ball up the middle a lot because you think about it, a lot of times that means you're probably late on an inside pitch, so you're hitting it kind of up the middle, or you're early on an outside pitch and you're rolling over a little bit up the middle. Um, Obviously, a pitch over the middle of the plate, you would love to hit to center and hit it hard and whatever into a gap. But for the most part, hitting it to the middle of the field isn't always the best way to look at things. So it's interesting to me that's much higher than it's been in the minors for him. But I do think along the lines of the bat speed, like you talked about, when he hit his 440-foot homer a week and a half ago or whatever that was against the Pirates, he it was a 76 mile per hour swing. We've seen him up to 86 miles per hour. He
Hmm.
doesn't need to be there to crush the ball. And I think there's an element of a smooth swing rather than an
Yeah,
over it's over swinging in some cases when you get there. And bat speed is
that's
great,
what I
but you
mean.
want it to
Yeah.
be controlled. You want it to be controlled bat speed. So I think him living in that range is the best outcome. And then when you see a pitch you love, like, yeah, take a huge hack at it. Like, that's fine. Um, but being able to stay controlled and also still bring that bat speed with just a smooth 76 mile per hour swing, which is like an above average bat speed, is incredible. So I think we've seen a lot of good stuff. I think he's going to figure things out. But I'm going to take it away from him. And I think I'm curious if we think we need to see Brewer Hickling get a shot at some point here because he is mashing in AAA. Is he a prospect? No, he's an older guy. He's had a little bit of major league experience with the Royals, and he was a big prospect at one point for the Royals. I should note he was a two-sport guy who ended up going. I guess he was a seventh round pick for the Royals, but he made his way into, I believe, into the top 100 on some lists at one point, and then he kind of fell off because the hit tool never was there. But so far this year, he's striking out at a 25% clip, which is more than reasonable for someone who's hitting a bunch of home runs and hitting for a bunch of power. He's got 11 homers, a 147 WRC plus. He's walking 14% of the time. So there's a lot of good with him right now. I'm just curious if he's ever going to get a chance. It's hard because the Brewers have a lot of young outfielders and a lot of outfield depth. Um, but he's also a great athlete. He plays a solid I mean, he's got 19 steals and 22 attempts this year too. Like, dude can move. Fangraphs gave him 70 speed in 2022, only a couple of years ago. So there's a lot to like here. He's only 28 still. I would love to see him get a chance. I think it would probably have to be for a guy like Frelick more than Chourio, but I also understand that it's already a platoon type of issue there because Chourio's the righty that would probably get sent down if you were going to bring up a new righty for that. So, yeah, Gunnar, do you have any thoughts on Brewer Hicklin?
Yeah, I think first, if you want to talk about my swing comps, which I haven't done in a little bit of a while, but the first thing I thought of when I saw him, he's got a very simple, compact swing. And I guess I used a buzzword there. I don't like using those buzzwords where it's a compact swing, but it does. It's not a lot of movement at all. And I thought of an old friend, Mark Canna. I remember
Oh yeah,
I felt like that was a pretty similar sort of stance and the way he got to the ball. It looked like it, but. I'm glad you brought up how you can't really view it as he's an outfielder and we got too many outfielders. It's more of like a right-handed bat, and what would that
yeah,
replace in the lineup? Because you can find ways to make guys play in that sense. So, um, him being a righty, and yeah, I think there's probably a window there for him to get called up, and batting wise, we could definitely use it. He's just trying to find at bats in that sense, but. Yeah, I mean, as far as getting in the outfield, it's definitely going to be tough. I mean, Garrett Mitchell's coming back too in a couple of weeks, most likely. So, if we're trying to find innings as far as outfield innings, it's going to be tough. And like you also said, I mean, maybe it's a sort of a thing where he's not even in our sights because he's maybe viewed as this guy who's just a quadruple A player, and he's just more for depth in an emergency situation. And we've got plenty of those guys, I guess, that we've had over the years where it's look at his stats in AAA, and it's just not going to happen in the major league. So I think it's worth giving a shot for sure, especially right now when guys aren't playing well in that position. I guess if you want to talk about positions or before Garrett comes up and just see what happens. But I would view it more from that as just like a ready bat. Maybe could provide some power, but yeah, I wouldn't hate it. I know
yeah,
that.
yeah. I think it would be him not being on the 40 man makes it harder to. You got to find a spot on the
Hmm.
40 man, and then you have a bunch of guys coming off the 60 days some pretty soon, which means you're gonna have to clear some spots already. So, Frelick did not go. Thank you. Well, at least the Brewers are not getting no hit. Both Bowers and Frelick, or not getting perfect gamed. Is that a way to say that? They are getting no hit currently, but Jake Bowers and Sal Frelick both walk. So we have first and second, two outs now. Oh, Craig, shut up. He didn't come close to going. All right. Um, that's my update for you. You'll have no idea what's happening, although maybe you will if you watch the game. Um, yeah. So, well, Chourio's up now. So while we're doing our random Brewers, maybe he'll make us look good and show up in a big spot here. But I will say Ben Brown looks absolutely disgusting. We didn't really say how good he looked, but he's throwing like
I was
98
gonna say that
with
actually, and
cheese.
yeah, our last Cubs series, I watched him pitch, and he actually didn't pitch well, right? I think he had a couple blow up innings, but I'm like, he actually has some good stuff. And I'm
Oh,
like,
he
he
was,
looks
yeah.
like electric, but
I
we hit
think he
him
was
good, I think.
he's been a top 100 guy for a couple of different
Yeah.
publications at least. So they got him, I believe, from the Phillies for David Robertson, which what are you doing, Phillips? What are you doing? They got him for that, and they got Pete Crow Armstrong for Javi Baez, who was he actually had his only good half season in the last decade for the Mets that year. So maybe that wasn't terrible for the Mets, but um, yeah, the Cubs with some, I guess you can't call them lucky. It was good, well scouted and good trades on their part. But Brown is going to be a pain for a while. He's going to be in that.
Hmm.
There's a lot of good young pitching in this division we're going to have to deal with mostly Pirates, I guess, but dang it, throw it away, Dansby. Okay. Chourio grounded out. Decent swing. All right, Gunnar, why don't you kick us off with our random brewer now that I've led into it? That was a great segue, huh? I thought I led into that really well.
Yeah, this one's more off the top of my head, honestly. I forgot to do this, but I was thinking of Craig Counsell years in the Brewers, and then I'm like, I don't want to go hitter. I've probably gotten a lot of hitters there. So then I thought of Claudio Vargas, which I don't even know if they crossed paths or not, but I think they did. They had to have. It was late 2000s and then early 2010s, but yeah, I think he was a starter with us originally, and then he came back. I remember a trade deadline trade or winter meetings. I don't remember. I think it was trade deadline, and we were competing for the playoffs. Maybe 20. Guess I could just search it while I'm talking. But
It was '09
uh,
he came back, it looks like.
okay, yeah. So I mean, that whole sort of section, we were sort of competing for the playoffs, but never make it outside the 2 years that we know. But yeah, he came back and was just absolutely electric in the bullpen, and I'm like, well, this is the cheap way to cheap pickup at the deadline to get an old friend, and then ends up being absolutely insane. And then the next year it looks like he was horrible. So quite the opposite there. But yeah, just a classic guy where got some good memories out of him and not a huge name, but meant something to me in my childhood for absolutely
Yeah.
no reason. So
Yeah. Looks like he
yeah,
was traded with Johnny Estrada and Greg Aquino to the D-backs for Doug Davis, Dana Eveland, and Dave Krinzel. Um,
you just
no,
gave up so many good names that we
that's
could have
how,
used in the
no, never
future.
mind. That's how we got him from the Diamondbacks. Sorry, he was with Aquino and Johnny Estrada for Davis, Eveland, and Krinzel. I was going to say Davis came in the Richie Sexton trade, so that didn't make sense, but it was the opposite. I was reading them backwards. And then we traded Vinny Rotino for him in 2009. So, yeah, maybe Claudio Vargas is a Dodgers play by or color commentary guy now because that's Vinny is the Brewers
That
color
would
guy.
make sense. Yeah.
I think that's how it has to work. Yeah, Claudio Vargas, that's a good pick. Um, I went with Ariel Pena mostly because I found an Ariel Pena card the other day when I was going through some of my baseball card collection. And it was not just an Ariel Pena card. It was an Ariel Pena and Nevin Ashley card, which I've already talked about Nevin Ashley and his wife Ashley on this podcast before. But who and why was there a card made? It was like Star Rookies or something, Ariel Pena and Nevin Ashley, which was just insane. Pena was part of the Greinke trade with Segura
I
and
was
Johnny
gonna say
Elway,
that. Yeah.
also talked about already. Pena pitched in only 7 games for the Brewers. 5 of them were starts his first year. He was not good. He wasn't as bad as Johnny Helwig. We'll give him that. He had a 4.28 ERA in 2015. He walked about a batter every 2 innings, which isn't great, but he did strike out more than, or basically struck out 9 per 9. So he had pretty good stuff. I remember when we got him, I thought he was the better pitching prospect. Granted, I don't think
Hmm.
14-year-old Spencer was as in tune with pitching and prospects in general, but I thought he was the better of the two between him and Hellweg. And I believe he had some shoulder injuries at one point, and then he just never was able to really get healthy for the Brewers. But Yeah, Ariel Pena. Just because I found that card the other day and I could not believe that there was a card that said star. I have a picture. Let me pull it up quick. But there was a there was no reason for it to be as big of a deal on the card as it seemed to be. Let's see. Yeah, 2016 rookie stars, Topps Heritage, Ariel Pena and Nevin Ashley. Neither of them ever played for the Brewers after 2016. So great work by Topps. They really got. Although to be fair, I don't know that the Brewers had any other good rookies that at that point. So they may have been right. That may have been the
Yeah.
best they could do on that specific type of card. But yeah, now I'm rambling, and the Brewers are still down 1-0 and still getting no hits. So there's your last update because we are done. So please like and subscribe. Oh, well, I think Chourio just got a bad read on a ball and it fell in for a hit. So now
Well,
I'm
good
feeling
timing.
like I may have jinxed something here. Okay. Please like and subscribe on whatever platform you are listening on. Remember to follow us on Twitter at the Cream City Pod, and please feel free to leave feedback for us on how we can get better. Thank you all for listening. The Brewers are going to get a hit. I'm calling it now. I will edit this out if they don't, and we will see you next time.
Crew.